Testing, testing. Where did disappeared? Yeah. All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is going to be session 2 of Understanding Islam. And so tonight there is a bunch of stuff like there was last night. So trying to get through as much as we can. So it'll be a little bit fire hoses. But if you have questions, raise your hand. I don't know the answers to all this stuff, but I find it very fascinating. But it'd be good if we have discussions. And one of the things I always want us to do as we go through these, because we're going to be focusing overwhelmingly on Islam, but just always in your mind to be contrasting and reminding yourself how grateful we should be to have our God versus what we hear coming from the sources of Islam. And so before we start, I'm going to pray. God, we are so grateful to be able to call you our Lord. There's so many other religions around the world whose adherents would hear our claims that God would love us enough to become a man, that he would come and enter into our sufferings, that he would experience poverty and humiliation, and Lord, that he would die for us. And so many people would look at Jesus and say, I can't believe that. And it's really a stunning truth that you did that for us. Lord, we thank you that you're an incarnational God who draws near, who loves us, who enters into relationship with us. And I pray, Lord, as amazing as this sounds to all people around the world, some of whom are amazed with a sense of ridicule, but that we would be amazed by grace, that you are a God who loves us enough to endure all of that for us. Lord, I pray as we talk about Islam tonight that you would allow us to keep charitable hearts, but to recognize truth and to see evil for what it is. And Lord, I pray that you would be with us in this teaching and that you would be exalted by contrast of what we hear tonight. We pray all this in Christ's name. Amen. All right, so first off, tonight there's 2 parts of what we're going to focus on. First one, we're going to get into one of the things in Islam that is one of the more controversial. So, we're hitting it with controversy. Last time we talked about a lot of the beautiful things that come with Islam and some of Muhammad's early ministry that was forbearance and charity and hospitality. And a lot of that changed as his ministry went along. But I want to hit something that's called the satanic verses at the beginning to talk about Muhammad's description of the realm of spiritual beings and what that means for Islam and some of the things that when you put it all together, I think paints a picture that's interesting to me at least. And then we'll continue the history of Islam coming up to modern day if we have time and some of the influences that came out of it, which are born out of the Quran. So in the Bible equates the worship of false gods to demonic worship. It sounds harsh. Like my son Caleb was telling me that he's at his school and was talking to one of his coaches, and he said, I believe that this religion leads to wicked things, and even the teacher was like, you can't say that about a religion. And I'm like, well, the Bible says that about a religion. In fact, it jumps up and down saying Moses warning the Israelites not to offer sacrifices to demons that are no gods. And so one of the things that jumps out at the Bible is these false gods, they're not just figments of the imagination. The Bible comes and says, well, some of them might be figments of the imagination, but in other ones, you're actually worshiping demonic presences. So demons that are no gods. The Psalms claim that idolaters sacrifice their sons and daughters not to made up deities, but to the demons. Paul claimed that pagans offer worship to demons and not to God. The Apostle John declared that idolaters were worshiping demons. And so you see this in this realm in the scriptures, because this is going to be one of the many contrasts as we go through this study. Goodness. Anyway, what is it, me? The Bible teaches that Satan is an angel who masquerades as an angel of light. He led a great rebellion of the angels in heaven. 1/3 of the angels were cast down to the earth. The angels sinned against the Lord, and they are irredeemably evil, right? So Satan himself is a fallen angel. Jude 6 says, the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains. And the Bible comes and it says, okay, these angels are fallen. Satan is a fallen creature. He is an angel, but he's irredeemable along with all of the other demons. They are kept in eternal chains. There will be no, you know what, as a demon, I think I'm going to give my life to Christ. Like, that's not the way that Christianity or the Bible presents it. And by the way, Islam comes along and says that the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, and the gospel are inspired. So it affirms them. We're going to get into that more maybe next time. But he says that they're irredeemable, right? Hebrews 2:16, for surely it is not angels that he helps, but he helps the offspring of Abraham. And here you have the New Testament coming and saying God is not on a mission to redeem angels. He's on a mission to redeem man. And Jesus is a man, not an angel. He will say to those on his left, depart from me, you accursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels, right? And so the scriptures come along and it says that there are angels which never sin, right? That are loyal to God, and then there are fallen angels that are evil to the core. They are irredeemable. They've been cast down, and they are kept in eternal chains. And how are we to interact with that demonic realm? Be sober-minded. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. So you gain, that's the picture of the demonic realm that you see in Christianity and in the scriptures, right? Islam presents a very different view of this realm. And it's interesting in how it does it. So here's the demonic realm according to Islam. They don't believe in the fall of man. Let me start before you read ahead. Islam does not believe in the fall of man. Man was not made good. He's just kind of neutral, and however you live out your life, if your preponderance of your life is good versus evil, but all people are born kind of clean slate. What does Christianity teach? That man was made utterly pure and innocent in the eyes of God, in the image of God, perfect in his innocence and righteousness, and then there was a choice to rebel against Satan, and what happened to all men as a result? All of us inherit faulty spiritual genetics, right? We're all fallen. We're born selfish. We're born in sin. Every one of us is a mess. Islam comes and says there was no fall of Adam and Eve. You know, they made a mistake, but all of humanity was not impacted by what Adam and Eve chose to do. But they give a whole different version of the fall to begin with. So this is in the Quran. Remember, in the Quran when it says we, and it's speaking as Allah, that's called the royal we. It's not polytheistic to Muslims. We said to the angels, bow down before Adam, and they all bowed down, but not Iblis. And I think I'm pronouncing that right, but not Iblis. He was one of the jinn, and he disobeyed the Lord's command. Are you going to take him and his offspring as your masters instead of me, even though they are your enemies? What a bad bargain for the evildoers. Do you get what's happening here? So here you have Satan, or Allah, who comes to the angels and says, bow down. But Iblis, who's one of the jinn, hold on to this, says no. And he goes to battle to corrupt Adam. And so the question to Muslims are you going to side with Satan, jinn, the jinn, which are these spiritual beings that they say are not angels? There's some other spiritual beings, some other spiritual category. And so in Islam, the jinn are shape-shifting spirits created from smokeless fire. They're not angels. We would liken them to demonic forces, but they're not angels. Islam claims that the jinn have free will to choose good and evil, and like humanity, they're going to face a judgment of either reward or punishment. So the jinn can go to heaven. The jinn can also be sent to hell. They're very much like man. Angels are created from light. They are more powerful. They, unlike the jinn, are incapable of sin. And so when you hear the word jinn, in the English, what word do we get out of that? Genie. You ever notice how all of the shows about genies come from what part of the world? Arabia, Arabian Nights, whatever. Like it's always, this is where it's going to come from. This is the idea. They're these tempters that can give you stuff, but they're crafty and maybe they're being good, but sometimes they're going to trip you up and you never know. They might be good, they might be bad. This is what Satan is. This is what Iblis is, right? And so the jinn can become Muslims, right? In Christianity, we wouldn't say like, I'm going to go out and preach the gospel to some demons. Like it would be like unthinkable to us because they are eternally damned. They will never be redeemed. In Islam, the jinn can become Muslims. In fact, Muhammad actually instructed Muslims not to kill snakes because they may be jinn who have accepted Islam. That's his comment. So here's a famous story we'll get to in a minute where he actually says this. In Islam, humans are not uniquely created in the image of God. That teaching is utterly offensive to Islam. Why? To say that man is created in the image of God, why would that be so offensive to Islam? Because unlike what we just talked about, how Jesus comes down and enters humanity and relates to us and he can enter into the incarnational experience of suffering and everything else, they look at that and they go, oh, far be it from Allah to have a son, far be it from Allah to experience anything like that. He is so high and exalted and so far above that, he would never. So to say that Allah creates us in his image is to degrade Allah, right? You follow? You see how they would come to that. And Allah would never condescend out of love to come down to us. How dare you say that? That's tremendously offensive and blasphemous in Islam. But Allah created the jinn and men that they may serve me. So we're kind of like brothers as creatures in a sense. Some are good, some are bad. We're all here made to serve them. They're just the spiritual beings. Both jinn and the humans will face judgment and can penetrate the realms of the heavens and the earth. That's right out of the Quran. When the Muslims imagine paradise, they imagine that there will be some faithful Muslims and martyrs and whatnot, and there will be some jinn along there with them. So in Islam, Iblis, which the main prevailing theory is it comes from a shortening of the Greek, diabolos. What does that sound like? That's devil, like Spanish. What is diablo, right? So when you translate into Arabic, this sound coming together doesn't happen, so they drop the D, and so it's what? Iblios, right? Which is where this name comes from for Satan. He is the chief adversary of Allah, and Satan generally refers to any devil or demon. So a Satan, they would say, a Satan tormented me. It's not the formal name of Iblis. And so, for instance, in the Quran, when Moses killed a man, he cried out, "This must be Satan's work." By the way, just so you know, and we're going to get to this, Islam takes so many stories out of the Old Testament, butchers a bunch of them, but it will claim, of course there's a Moses, of course there's a Joseph, there's a Jonah, there's an Adam, there's an Abraham, there's an Isaac, there's Jacob. It lifts these characters up, mangles their stories oftentimes, we'll see. But, like, here's Moses who kills the Egyptian and immediately is like, Satan tricked me into doing this. Like, this couldn't have possibly come from me because I'm a good prophet. And so, likewise, Job says, Satan has afflicted me with weariness and suffering. In that case, they're talking about a specific formal Satan, shaitan in their language. But here in the Quran, when you see a Satan or in the Hadith, you'll see it all the time. So, with that understanding, does everybody understand what a jinn is? I think I'm pronouncing that right. I hope. If anybody in here speaks Arabic, you're probably like, this guy's butchering all kinds of words. But you understand a jinn. Now we get to, this is Mount Hira. So this is in Mecca. This is the mountain where Muhammad claimed to have had his first encounter with Gabriel and other revelations from Gabriel. Somewhere on here, I tried to find it in a faraway image. There's a cave that he was supposedly in that when Gabriel came to him and said, "You're going to be my prophet, I'm going to speak to you." But the first encounter with Gabriel was something that was really traumatic, even though later on Muhammad claims that Gabriel came to him even as a young boy. Then the later one, he's like, "Oh, Gabriel, it was so terrifying. Basically like I'd never experienced that before." And you're like, "Well, wait, hold on. Later you say that he came to you when you were a little boy. Which is it?" So there's all kinds of those things in Islam. But this is from Bukhari, their highest hadith. So remember, Quran is their number one authority. What's right underneath it? The hadith. This is canonical for Islam, authoritative. And the number one is Bukhari for Sunni Islam, which is 70% of Islam. So in Bukhari 49:53, it tells the story of what happened. It says, then Allah's messenger returned with that experience, and the muscles between his neck and his shoulders were trembling as he came to his first wife. Before he took multiple wives, he was married to Khadijah. And he says, cover me. And they covered him. And when the state of fear was over, he said to Khadijah, O Khadijah, what is wrong with me? I was afraid something bad might happen to me. And then he told her the story. Khadijah said, nay, but receive good tidings. By Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. For by Allah, you keep good relations with your kith and kin. Speak the truth. Help the poor and the destitute. Entertain your guests generously. Assist those who are stricken with calamities. And you're like, okay, that Islam sounds pretty good. Nice, all right. He goes on, Khadijah then took him to Waraka bin Nawfal, which is a relative, right? So she's like, okay, this guy, my husband has had a vision. He's convulsing. His neck is doing weird things. He's terrified. He wants to be covered. We need to go see somebody spiritual. So they take him to Khadijah's paternal uncle, dad's brother. And Waraka had been converted to Christianity in the pre-Islamic period and used to write Arabic and write of the gospel in Arabic as much as Allah wished him to write. He was an old man and he had lost his eyesight. And so Muhammad and Khadijah are going, and like, we have this story. He was visited by an angel, Gabriel, da-da-da-da-da. We need help. So they're like, we're going to take him to a freshly converted Christian and he'll have answers. Which, this is a reason why freshly converted Christians, just chill out a minute. Khadijah said to Waraka, oh, my cousin, listen to what your nephew is going to say. And Waraka said, oh, my nephew, what have you seen? The prophet then described whatever he had seen, and Waraka said, this is the same angel Gabriel who was sent to Moses. What's the problem there? If you know your scriptures, Gabriel never visited Moses. Like, he goes to Daniel, he goes to Mary, right? Like, he's in the New Testament as well. But even here, you've got the Christian scholar who's assuring Muhammad that this is legit, saying, oh yeah, Gabriel, that's the one who visited Moses. And you're like, oh, that guy doesn't know his Bible. Like, so, and this kind of stuff is all over Islam. But this then gives Khadijah comfort to be like, oh, this is a real prophet. Like, he is speaking on behalf of God. Well, the historian Al-Tabari, if you remember him from last time, so remember in the levels of authority, you have Quran, the Hadith, the super Sahih Hadith, which are like mega authoritative. Then you have 4 other canonical ones. Then you have tradition and different things, and historians. So the historian Al-Tabari, who's writing within a couple hundred years of Muhammad, says, Muhammad attempted suicide multiple times after Gabriel's revelation. So this is a Muslim who's a very respected voice in Islam. And he says, the inspiration ceased for a time so that the prophet was distressed and grieved. Like, I had this visit by an angel, very traumatic, but now nothing's happened for a long time. And it says he would go to the tops of mountains to throw himself down, but whenever he reached the summit, Gabriel would appear and say, O Muhammad, you are indeed the messenger of God, and this would calm him. This happened several times. Now, Muslims today, what do you think they say about this historian's account? They're like, this is totally not trustworthy. You know, this historian's writing later. Of course, this is tradition that comes through other historians, and verbally this tradition was around. Why this would have been around in early Islam if it was false is beyond me. But it's around, and multiple of the early historians write about it. It's not in the Quran, though. The Hadith claims that Allah's messenger was now this is authoritative, that he was very much grieved when Gabriel delayed in visiting him. Al-Tabari wrote that he feared being labeled a madman by the Quraysh tribe, which is his hometown tribe in Mecca. So he threatened, Quraysh shall never say this of me. I shall take myself to a mountain crag and hurl myself down from it, kill myself, and find relief that way. And so in this, you have Muhammad, if you're following, he's like, everybody thinks I'm nuts. I've told them that I've been visited by Gabriel. I'm starting to share these messages. All of my family and tribe members are saying that I've lost my mind. Now, what do I do? What do I do? And so in Tabari, Al-Tabari's writing, he says he's suicidal. So oddly, Muhammad condemns suicide. He uses this exact method of suicide to illustrate why suicide is bad when he says, whoever purposefully throws himself down from a mountain and kills himself will be in the fire. Of all the ways to choose and talk about suicide, It's the very one that shows up in the histories, right? It's interesting. So in the Quran, it says, indeed, the local Quraysh tribe, it doesn't say it. So hold on. Indeed, the local Quraysh tribe did accuse him of being out of his mind. In the Quran, Allah has to come to the Prophet and say, by the Lord's grace, you are not afflicted with madness. Soon, so you will soon see, and they will too see, which of you is afflicted with madness. So what is the Quran saying? Right out of the gates, all the sources are like, there's real concern about Muhammad being crazy. Like, the reputation among the Quraysh, he's out of his mind. And the Hadith, you have Khadijah and Muhammad that are expressing fear over being out of his mind. There's talk of suicide in the historians' writings. This is a very, very weird, traumatic moment when Muhammad gets this first revelation. So now you get to the Quran's satanic verses. Now, when Muhammad, if you remember the first 12 years of Muhammad's life when he lives in Mecca, he comes and he's preaching wonderful things that are almost beatitudish, remember? He's like, bear your persecution. Never compel somebody in religion. You know, you endure persecution at the other hands. You love them. You speak a blessing over them. Even when you're persecuted, you show hospitality. You love. You do all that. And you're like, okay, well, I don't believe the whole Gabriel business, but you know, that teaching's pretty benign. That seems really wonderful. I wish people would do that. But in the midst of that, one of the things that Muhammad suffers, and this shows up in the Quran and the Hadith, is he's crushed that he's not embraced by his local hometown. Which you can understand. Jesus, by the way, suffers some of that, right? No prophet is honored in his hometown. Sound familiar? Muhammad is really, really put to the test by his hometown folks. And their big thing is Muhammad is like, you're not allowed to worship these pagan idols anymore. You got 360 idols in the Kaaba. And you can't do that. Like, you have to worship Allah. We need to walk away from all this idolatry. And so the Quraysh tribe of Mecca, that was his home tribe, is like, no, you're crazy. You're claiming things, but you're out of your mind. Muhammad's very bothered by that. And so this is where this comes in. If you've ever heard of the satanic verses, there's a guy who had a fatwa against him, Salman Rushdie. He wrote a book, a novel called The Satanic Verses, and he had his eye stabbed out when they came after him for doing that, for teaching what we're about to talk about. So in the Quran it says this. So you have considered, he's talking to the people of Mecca who want to be able to worship idols, right? He says, so have you considered Al-Layt and Al-Uzza and Manat, the third, the other one? So this is Gabriel through Muhammad, recitation of the Quran. And he says at the end of it, is the male for you and for him the female? That then is an unjust division. And you're like, what in the world? What's going on here? Let me explain. These are gods that are worshipped in Mecca, goddesses. They're female gods. And so now all of a sudden, in the Quran, you say, have you considered these goddesses? And so then it sounds like Allah, through Gabriel, is like condemning them. He's saying, wait, whoa. You want these female goddesses? Is the male for you? Like, you get me, Allah, this male God, this masculine God, and for him, God, the gods, the heavens, they're female? That's an unjust division. You can't have the male and then pawn off the females. That's inferior. That's unjust, is kind of the idea. But here's the problem. In today's Quran, it says Allah's rebuking them for going after idolatrous gods. You see that? But in the original, right after you get to this, so you have considered Al-Lat and Al-Uzza and Manat, the third, the other one. When you go back and you listen to the earliest historians and all the people who cite Islam back then, they include a different verse. And the verse after this is this. Have you considered Al-Lat and Al-Uzza and Manat, the third one, the other one? And then there's this verse. These are the exalted cranes, or the high-flying ones. Their intercession is to be hoped for. Well, now, if Muhammad is giving that recitation of the Quran, what's he saying? Yeah, pursue your gods. Hey, Mecca, you wanted polytheism. You wanted these gods. Well, here's 3 of your favorites. Pursue them. Like, it's a great thing. Their intercession is to be hoped for. And so what happens in the aftermath of this is all the Muslims come along, When this recitation is circling around and they're like, this can't be. Even today, when people hear this, they're like, okay, there's three explanations. Either this is entirely fabricated by all the people in early Islam, made up out of nowhere. Even though they're Muslims, they want to spread Islam. They believe the monotheism of Allah. They believe that it's wrong for Muhammad to say these things about pursuing other gods' intercession, but they just made it up. Or Satan caused the Quraysh, the people who heard him reciting this, he just like spoke into their ear, you should go after this. This is to be hoped for. And they heard something that Muhammad didn't say, option 2, or Satan had a demonic influence upon the prophet. Is everybody with me? Because this is a little bit confusing. Anybody have questions before we move on? Yeah, Leah? The first version. So this part? So later on, the version that, if you open your Quran right now, it goes from 19 and 20 is this, right? Like, so is the male, and this is 19 through 22. And at the end, it's like Allah rebuking the idea of considering these gods. So today's version of the Quran is cleaned up. Like, of course you shouldn't consider those gods, right? But the original that's cited by the early historians of Islam says, oh, this would be a wonderful thing. Have you considered them? Wonderful. Who wouldn't want them to be interceding for you? Go for it, Mecca. You can have your gods. We can be at peace. Awesome. We're all on the same team. You worship your gods. We'll throw Allah into the mix. Everybody will be happy. That's the idea. And then, all of a sudden, that verse gets taken out, abrogated as the Islamic doctrine, and now modern Muslims explain this away from one of these three options. You follow? So, the problem is the Quran references this and says, we have never sent any messenger or prophet before you, Muhammad, into whose wishes Satan did not insinuate something, but God removes what Satan insinuates, and then God affirms his message. So let me follow what the Quran is saying. Yes, we've never had a prophet. Going back all the way to Adam and Abraham and all the prophets that have come before you, of course Satan comes to the prophets and includes his message into their words. But the good news is that Allah then comes behind what Satan adds, takes it out, and then gives the pure message. And so what the Quran is saying is, guess who else is a prophet? Muhammad. And guess who else's messages are polluted with the wishes of Satan? Muhammad's. But Allah has to come behind and clean it up, right? And so as you're looking at this, all the Islamic historians, if this never happened, you go back to the earliest Islamic historians, including Ibn Ishaq, Al-Waqidi, Tabari, Baladhuri, whatever, Ibn Sa'ad, and every one of them includes that, what's called the satanic verse, right? That's had to be omitted because Satan added it into what Muhammad said. And so they provide a detailed account of how that satanic verse was abrogated. In other words, removed from the Quran, which is a little wild. He says, of course, the account was corrected because remember, none of the Quran is written down until when? Long after Muhammad's dead and gone. And then all of a sudden they're like, we should probably write this down because all the people who've memorized it are dying in battles of conquest. So we're going to write down the Quran. By then, Muhammad's already been corrected and rebuked, but what did that look like? Well, here we go. According to Al-Tabari, Muhammad was under the influence of Satan when he encouraged his pagan tribe members to pray to their own gods. Al-Tabari wrote, when the Quraysh heard him say you can pray to your own gods, they were delighted and greatly pleased at the way in which he spoke of their gods, and they listened to him. Well, the angel Gabriel then comes. This happens a lot in Muhammad's life, where he does something that you're like, oh my gosh, and Gabriel comes and says, no, it's fine, or fixes it for him. Like, oh, Gabriel fixed it for me. Gabriel immediately came to Muhammad and rebuked him for this idolatrous concession, saying, what have you done, Muhammad? You have read to these people something I did not bring to you from God, and you have said what he did not say to you. So the question is, if it didn't happen, why do all of the early Islamic scholars and historians recount it happening? And if they misheard him, because Satan just added it in and Muhammad is pure, then why in the world does Gabriel come to Muhammad and rebuke him for adding words not given to him. So no matter what, Muhammad's on the hook, right? Muhammad's not following the pure message of Gabriel, and it's coming from Satan, right? So in Quran 17, here's another one, I think, referring to this incident. Quran 17, 73 to 75, it says, "Indeed, they were about to tempt you away from that which we revealed to you in order to make you invent about us something else." So this is Allah coming to Muhammad saying, the pressure on you was so great, and they came to you and they wanted you to invent something else about us that's not true. In other words, that you could worship all these other things. But thank goodness we revealed it to you. And then they would have taken you as their friend, and if we had not strengthened you to fix your error, you would have almost inclined to them a little. And in that case, we would have made you taste a double punishment in this life and a double punishment after death. And then you would have found no one to help you against us. In other words, here's Allah through Gabriel to Muhammad saying, you do that again or you fall on the wrong side, you're getting a double taste of hell, right? And so every time Muhammad steps in it or does something, Gabriel always magically comes and says, ta-da, it's fixed. Or Gabriel comes and says, no, it's perfectly normal for you to do that to a woman. And then how shameful for anyone to object to you doing that to a woman. That shows up in the Quran or the Hadith. So here's something that I found even more interesting, I think, than the satanic verses, which it's a real problem, right? It's a big problem if your prophet is recounting things from Satan. Can we agree on that? I prefer not, right? So Muhammad's interactions with demons, and when I say demons, what are the creatures I'm talking about in Islam? Jinn, right? So now let's walk through these because it's kind of wild. Muhammad taught that the devil flows in man like his blood. So in everybody in here, the devil, these spiritual beings of darkness and manipulation and mischief, it's in all of your blood. The devil, and by the way, Muhammad would say to himself that this was true. Muhammad claimed that when he was a little boy, he was playing with some other kids and Gabriel comes to him, which makes it weird that when Gabriel comes to him at Mount Hira, he's totally like, whoa, who is this Gabriel? When he's like, oh, when I was a little boy, this happened. He claimed that Gabriel first confronted him when he was playing as a child. Gabriel supposedly took hold of him and made him lay prostrate on the ground, tore open his chest, took out the heart from him, extracted a blood clot out of it, and said, this was the part of Satan in thee. And so Muhammad is saying what? And by the way, Bukhari and Muslim are the two big hadiths that are they're considered authentic. So what's going on here is Muhammad saying, yeah, Satan flows through all you guys. But when I was a little boy, Gabriel caught me and opened my chest, did some open heart surgery, took a blood clot out of me and said, yep, see this blood clot? That was Satan. So you're good now, right? Except when he goes on his nighttime journey, does anybody remember what happens before he gets on his winged horse and flies to Jerusalem and then up into the heavens? Gabriel shows up again and says, oh, I'm going to rip open your ceiling and I'm going to come in you. I'm going to open your heart again and I'm going to wash it with Zamzam water and then I'm going to take you on this magical ride. And so it's like, why did he need to be redeemed again? Why does his heart need to be opened up again if Satan was already removed? And so Gabriel performs the same actions I just talked about. While I was in Mecca, the roof of my house was open, and Gabriel descended, opened my chest, and washed it with Zamzam water. Bukhari 349. Here's one that's kind of wild. Aisha, you'll know this name. Aisha is one of his wives. She was the one that he married when she was 6, and he consummated the marriage sexually when she was 9. The very famous downer on Muhammad's character. That one to me is the death blow. There's no way you're making that okay with me. But anyway, Aisha comes to him and says, is a devil attached to everyone? Right? Because in Islam, everybody has a demon or a jinn that's assigned to them. Right? And so she asked the question and he says, yes. So Aisha again said, Allah's messenger, is it with you also? Okay, so everybody else has a demon. Do you have a demon? And he said, yes, but my Lord has helped me against him, and as such, I am absolutely safe from his mischief. So his demon is not a good one, right? Because he performs what? He's a mischievous one, right? I've got a demon that's always around me trying to lead me into mischief. But Allah, he makes me strong enough to where the demon has no power over me. Well, listen to another hadith. Allah's messenger said, there is none among you in whom there is not an attaché from amongst the jinn, the devils. So in other words, everybody has their own little personal devil. They said, Allah's messenger, is he with you too? Thereupon he said, yes. Now get this. But Allah helps me against him, and so I am safe from his hand, and he does not command me but for good. Do you get what just happened there? Allah is, or what Muhammad is saying, is that everybody has a personal devil. He's got a mischievous one, right? And he listens to his. But Allah makes sure that the only words that he listens from his demon is when he's telling him to do good stuff. So if I came up to you and I said, yeah, I've got a demon, but I only listen to the good things he tells me to do. Right? And so in this, like one of the things that I believe in, it might not be popular, I think Muhammad suffered deep demonic influence. I think his whole bout of Islam and the Quran, like this is super controversial to say, but even if I take him at his own word, he's got a devilish demon that's going around commanding him, and he's saying, yeah, I listen to it because he only commands me for good. What? You mean the same one that you said keeps you safe, like Allah keeps you safe from that one's mischief? How is he mischief if he only commands you for good? Like, head blowing up, like none of this makes any sense. So now you get to 1 Timothy 4, this is in the scriptures, and it says, the Spirit expressly says that in the later times some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and the teaching of demons. So what is the Spirit inspiring Timothy to say? There's going to come a time when there's going to be people who lead many astray, and they are going to spread the teachings of demons. I think that's what this is. Through the insincerity of liars whose consciences are seared, they're irredeemable, their consciences have just grown callous. Muhammad suffered supernatural spells of evil. This too is from their stuff. This is Bukhari 32:68, if you want to read it yourself. In the hadith, Muhammad's wife Aisha again stated that magic was worked on the prophet so that he began to fancy that he was doing a thing which he was not actually doing. So he's brought into a spell where he's out of his mind. He's imagining things are going on and people are talking and things are happening that are not actually happening. And during this frightening season of hallucinatory behavior, two people came to Muhammad in a dream to discuss the evil spell that had taken control of his mind. He learned that a Jewish man, of course, used a cursed comb filled with hair and the pollen of the male date palm to cast a spell upon the prophet's mind. So I guess they took stuff from a date palm, gave him to him as a brush, he combed his hair, and it infected him, right? This evil spirit took him over. The comb was thrown into a well. Muhammad explained that date palms from that location were like the heads of the devils. He ordered the well to be filled up where the comb was, fill it up with earth, and he assured people that Allah had cured him. So here we see another time where you've got Muhammad going, I've been infected with an evil spell. Sounds familiar to the first time he gets the revelation. It sounds familiar to this. He's telling people, I've got this personal demon. So this is on one occasion when he's in Mecca, and he's really sad. Remember, because he gets really sad that Muhammad, or that Gabriel is not talking to him. He goes through these long spells. So on one occasion, Muhammad becomes so sick with grief after having not received revelations for a season, so he's forced to skip nightly prayer, which is against whatever. But anyway, he's too sick. And it says that this woman who did not like him, a local woman, is mocking him, saying, "O Muhammad, I think your Satan has forsaken you, for I have not seen him with you for 2 or 3 nights." And this is in Bukhari. Again, authoritative hadith. And I just ask you the question, if this is in the hadith, why would they include this? Because what do you reason out of this is, even if she's a detractor, and she's like, you are no good and I don't like you and you're a dumb prophet and I won't follow Islam ever, the Bukhari hadith is acknowledging, what does Muhammad have? You're Satan. You're really sick. You're out of it. You're not enjoying all your religious stuff. Your Satan has been missing. He must have forsaken you, which means this woman recognizes that he has a Satan that is in relationship with him, and it's noticeable when the Satan is gone. I don't like that. I don't like demons hanging around my prophets, especially ones that are admittedly up to mischief. So Muhammad also tells the story of a man who goes home after battle. This is just, it's like you read this, it's all over the Islamic sources. The man found his wife standing between two doors. So she's outside when he gets home. And what's his response? A woman outside the home? He bent towards her, smitten by jealousy, and made a dash toward her with a spear in order to stab her. Like, just sit on that a minute. Like, that's normal? Because the hadith doesn't even address that. Like, oh, of course you're going to stab her. She's out. How dare you stand in the doorway? Get back in your home, right? She said, keep your spear away and enter the house until you see that which has made me come out. In other words, like, I couldn't stay in there. Please don't kill me. I had to come out, oh husband who loves me so much. And he entered and found a big snake coiled on the bedding. And you're like, okay, well, that's what happens when you see a big snake coiled on bedding. It's getting a shovel, like real short order, right? Muhammad explained that the warrior and the snake both died fighting each other, and then Muhammad warned, he's like rebuking that guy, warning, there are in Medina jinn who have accepted Islam. So when you see any of them, as a snake, pronounce a warning to it for 3 days, and if they appear before you after that, then kill it, for it's a devil. And I want you to pause for a moment, and I want you to hear in this. Muhammad is saying, do not kill a snake, for it might be a Muslim demon. I know stories of snakes in the Bible. Interesting that Muhammad finds them worthy of protection, that snakes are going to be in paradise that are possessed by the demonic. Little weird, right? And that he's so protective of them. And can you imagine, I just want to say this, can you imagine being the guy that, like, you show up and a king cobra's coiled up on your bed and you're like, are you a Muslim? And having to wait 3 days, honey, we're going to have to sleep in the other room and close the door because we got to wait 3 days to find out if this snake is a Muslim. Yeah. Give him a chance to, like, out himself as a Muslim. I don't get it either. There's so much that's hard to get in this. Like, I mean, really. And I'm trying. I know I'm not doing a good job of being gracious toward this because it's so bizarre to me and disturbing to me. And this gets back to what we talked about last week, where we have to be careful because there are so many Muslims who are authentically kind, gracious, wonderful people, right? And I have to believe that most of them have no idea this stuff exists in the Quran. It is a familial loyalty that's been handed down. This is part of my identity. I can't walk away from it. And I think if they were here hearing this, they would be like, oh my gosh, how do you respond to this? I don't know what to do. This is part of my identity. I can't walk away from it. And so I know so many people. The guy who runs our Bible show, he comes from a Muslim family, right? Convert now. But he knows, like, my family would know none of this stuff. Because once you see it, it's like, do I have to affirm that? And a lot of the more recent movements of Islam, you either get the fundamentalists who believe everything in the Quran and they're up for conquest, right? Or you have some of the branches of Islam that break away that are like, okay, we're distancing ourselves from all of the early stuff, but we want to hold on to that which is beautiful, like family and hospitality and kindness and charity. And there are those Muslims, and they would hear this and be grieved, right? That's like, man, I don't want that in my faith. I don't know what to do with it, but that's who I am. I'm a Muslim. And what I want to invite any Muslim who ever hears this or might be in this room even is there's such a better, more beautiful God. I mean, a beautiful God who loves you and would become a man and enter into your sufferings and is so much greater than what's presented here. And true. We can defend our faith with no problem. But I mean, a lot of this, and we haven't even started into some of the claims that they make about the Torah and the gospel next time. But Muhammad claimed to have physically wrestled a demon. He says, a strong demon from the jinn came to me last night suddenly to interrupt my prayer, but Allah enabled me to overpower him. I wanted to tie him to one of the pillars of the mosque so you could all see him in the morning, but I remembered the prayer of my brother Solomon. So it's like, I beat him. I want you to know I beat demons. But then I remembered the prayer of Solomon, so I let him go. Like, okay. The Muslim historian Ibn Sa'd, 845 AD, claimed to have recorded Muhammad's words as he neared his death. After boasting that he owed no debts, Muhammad told his companions, quote, "I have a Satan who takes possession of me. So when he comes to me, avoid me so that I may have no effect on your hair and your skins." So now, like Muslims would say, that's not authentic, that's not historical. But why in the world are champions of Islam in the early days recording this? Like this is the words that are going around among Muslims. Like he is inhabited by Satan who takes possession of him. So don't get near him or you'll be polluted when Satan takes possession of him. Like I don't know any of the early church that says these kinds of things about Jesus. Like, it wouldn't happen. Why in the world are there so many Muslims that talk about Muhammad's encounters and possession from demons? So Martin Luther labeled Muhammad a devil and a firstborn child of Satan. He always had a way with words. Very, very gracious guy. John Calvin wrote that the Quran led many to become brute beasts and added that Muhammad gave them the cup of his devilish dreams to drink and they got drunk with them. Dante, who writes the Inferno, placed Muhammad in the eighth circle of hell, a place reserved for frauds. And so you go beyond that with Muhammad's encounters with devils, and it's like he's obsessed with them. And some of these are interesting, but I'm going to share them with you. Ready? Muhammad instructed when one of you wakes up from sleep, so these Muslims are supposed to do this, he should wash his nose 3 times, for Satan spends the night in the upper part of your nose. Right? Like, my wife's heard me snore. It might be true. Anyway, like, but you got to wash your nose when you wake up 3 times, for Satan spends the night in the upper part of your nose. By the way, another tip for your sleep. During your sleep, Satan ties 3 knots at the back of the head of each of you, and he breathes the following words at each knot: "The night is long, so keep sleeping." So if that person wakes up and celebrates the praises of Allah, then one knot gets untied. And when he performs ablution, the second knot's undone. And when he prays, all the knots are undone. And he gets up in the morning lively and in good spirits. Otherwise, he gets up in low spirits and lethargic because Satan's knots are not untied. And it's like, all right, interesting. Muhammad said the following remedy for satanic dreams: if anyone has a dream in which he does not like, he should spit on his left side 3 times, seek refuge with Allah from the Satan 3 times, and let him turn over from the side on which he was sleeping. It's like a just obsession with this. Muhammad warned yawning is from Satan. When one of you yawns, by the way, especially when I'm teaching, just to have you know that. When one of you yawns, he should try to suppress it as much as possible. And when one of you says, "Ugh," while yawning, Satan laughs at him. If you must yawn, the Prophet commands all Muslims to place his hand over his mouth, for the devil enters your mouth if you yawn and don't cover your mouth. Muhammad commanded Muslims to rid their houses of bells because there is a devil along with every bell. Why do you think that is? What do the churches have? Devils come with bells, right? Angels do not enter a house in which there is a bell. So if you have a bell in your house, you will have no angelic protection. In addition, you should know that angels do not enter a house in which there's a dog or there are pictures. By the way, the Quran is so against music and art and pictures and everything. It's such a oppressive thing. Like no dogs. Like I like dogs better than I like most people. Like so to say that's bad as a pastor, I know, but angels don't enter a house when like, what kind of creatures are angels if they're like, not the Cocker Spaniel? Like, anyway, it's just bizarre. Neither do angels watch over those who travel with a dog. So if you take your dog on a trip, you're on your own. No protection from Allah for you. Muhammad taught he who eats an onion and garlic and leek should not approach the mosque, for the angels are harmed by the same things as the children of Adam. In other words, like, we're harmed by your bad breath, so are the angels. Stay away. According to Muhammad, there are particular noises that reveal the presence of a demon. When you hear the crowing of roosters, ask for Allah's blessings, for they have seen an angel. When you hear the braying of donkeys, seek refuge from Allah, from Satan, for their braying indicates that they have seen a Satan. So, interesting. You can also find Satan at the births of new babies, and it's like, come on, don't ruin that. He explained, a child cries loudly at the time of birth because of the touch of Satan. So, like, every time you hear, and now I want you to stop. If this is a demonic religion, life is beautiful, right? We're a people of life. God always loves life. Life triumphs over death. In Islam, a newborn baby crying is a sign of Satan. Really? Like, that's one of the most angelic, wonderful moments. And it's like, for Islam, it's tied to the presence of Satan. Come on. Anyway, I had to do that just because I'm a teenage boy. You ever seen The Water Boy? Foosball is the devil. Anyway, Muhammad explained that Satan also goes to extreme lengths to keep people from hearing Muslim calls to prayer. If a Muslim misses his morning prayers, it might be because Satan has urinated in his ears. During the prayer call, Satan takes to his heels and passes wind with noise during his flight in order not to hear the adhan, which is the call to prayer. Like, okay. If you want to avoid Satan getting into your food, you must cover them because Satan does not open a closed vessel or untie a knot or uncover a vessel. He is powerless against Tupperware. Like, you get the idea. And I mean, there's so much about this. According to Allah, Satan helped to shape the purpose behind the cosmology of the universe. The stars are actually Allah's missiles for stoning devils. He commanded Muslims to finish their morning prayers before completion of sunrise because the sun actually comes between the horns of the devil, and you don't want that to be completed before you offer your prayers. And so, any questions about the demonic realm? Because now we're moving back to finish history. Yeah. So the satanic verse, it goes back to the Quran where it's talking about the three goddesses that he says you should have them intercede for you. That's all that's talking about. And then the verses that come and say that Satan always insinuates his message into the words of a prophet. So, but Allah always corrects it, so it'll be okay. And some Islamic scholars today, by the way, say, yes, that is true. But look, Allah won. Those verses were taken out, so no harm, no foul. But it's still alarming that you have a prophet who's doing Satan's bidding. Yeah, I agree. I would say they're all satanic verses, but most of the ones that we read later are not in the Quran. They're coming from authentic and authoritative hadith, right? The Bukhari and Muslim. All right, so jumping into any other questions on that first part? Yeah. It's all good. Welcome to Rio. That's what we do here. Jinn, yeah. So interestingly, when the fall, because remember they don't believe in a fall. Like there's no sin of Adam imputed to anybody. Everybody is their own person in Islam, and they're all under Allah, fighting for paradise. But the jinn are present, Iblis, so that the jinn who is Satan equivalent, is in the presence of the angels, right? And he is cast down because he stands against Adam's authority. When Allah says, bow before Adam, serve Adam, Iblis, which comes from Diablos, says no. And so he is cast away and becomes an evil jinn. But the Quran says that every jinn is just like a person in Islam. Some are good, some are bad. Some have a preponderance of good deeds that they do, some have a preponderance of bad deeds they do, and all of them will face judgment. So if there is, I don't think so. I think the creatures that are the spiritual beings break down into angels, which are perfect and do not sin and are beings of light, and then the jinn, which are the what is it, colorless smoke? I forget how they put it. What is it? Smokeless fire. Yeah, sorry. Um, and that's where the jinn come from, but they are corruptible. and mischievous. They're like the genies. You ever watch a movie about genies? It's like they seem like, oh, you're my friend, and then they end up sabotaging you somehow. Same kind of an idea. Oh yeah, I'll give you a podcast to listen to. That's a crazy topic. That will require 3 of these classes. Um, but in our, if you go to the Bible show, when we do episodes for Genesis 5 and 6, we get into all the different theories on that. So check that out. All right, awesome. Thanks. Anyone else? All right, so yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. I think way better than us is to give people who've been on the journey before. There are plenty of really wonderful Muslims who have walked away from Islam and embraced Christ, and they talk about their journey. And I would recommend reading them, like even if it's giving them a book. Um, when you hear this, like I remember because I left a different faith tradition to come to the one I'm in now, and as small as that was, it was traumatic for me, right? Because it's like, well, this is what I thought I knew about God, and it turns out like I was wrong on it, and it was scarring. Like it hurt. It was like, but this is all I've ever known, and now I'm finding out like I don't think what I've always known is what it was. Um, and they've got so much invested, even more so than Catholics or Jews. The familial loyalty to Islam is even deeper, and so it's much more painful to walk away from it. And so I think listening to people who've been there, done that have had to endure that trauma, it would be picking up books. Like what were some of the best books? What is his name? Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus is a great one. Yeah. Yeah, he died of stomach cancer, but he's a wonderful voice. And there's different voices like that would be better than listening to me. I can't enter into Islamic culture, and I've got biases galore, like for sure. Um, anyway, a good question, and I think one of the more important things is, whenever you're talking with a Muslim and you mention what the love of Christ looks like and the character of Christ is, it's really astonishing to them because it's so different than who Allah is. To hear that there is a God who loves you that deeply and the intimacy that he desires, it's foreign. It seems like that's impossible, to somebody who's coming out of a Muslim background, because Allah might be merciful, but he's not intimate. He doesn't, his emotions for you are not like the Bible describes, the Spirit groaning with a power too deep for words, or Jesus living ever always to intercede on your behalf, or him weeping over Jerusalem, wanting to draw people to himself, or laying down his life, or referring to us as a bride. Like, that is totally foreign. And when you can catch a glimpse and the aroma of the love of God, it melts you. It makes you jealous. I remember reading a comment of somebody who was Muslim who was watching the Charlie Kirk funeral, the memorial service, and they were watching all of the people worship with just joy, and it was like, that's totally different than anything I've ever seen or encountered. And I'm not a Christian, and I don't think I'm becoming a Christian, but that made me really jealous of what they have. And I think as a believer, that is first and foremost, it's not winning an argument, it's winning a person. And it's showing them how precious your Savior is to you, because it's that kind of jealousy. Like, man, I wished I had that. I would say would be like your number one call to them. And to preach truth when wisdom allows for it. I mean, it would be stupid to be like, your God's a demon, like you're going to get a door slammed in your face and you're going to hurt them, and it's going to shut down the conversation. This conversation is, I want people to know what Islam is, because it's becoming more and more, like you talk about in Germany, the birthplace of the Reformation. it's becoming more and more consequential to understand what this is, because for the people that err on the side of the beautiful parts of Islam, it's great, but there's a lot of people who don't. And that is when you take that Islam, the Orthodox Islam, Sunni Islam, and you extrapolate that out to its final growth, it's like, we don't want that. We really don't want that. All right, any other questions? No way we're getting through the rest of the history, but that's okay. Like, I love this stuff. So this is, if you go back, remember, Jesus comes here, Muhammad comes 600 years later, and so he's picking up and saying all of the Old and New Testament stuff he kind of carries. You have the 5 pillars of Islam that Muhammad comes up with, and this is what most people know about Islam, if they know this. Like, it's a declaration of faith, prayer toward Mecca, giving of alms, pilgrimage to the Kaaba, fasting during Ramadan. I don't have a problem with any of that. Like, like civilizationally, like, that's all great. Sources of authority, we talked about this in terms of where they rank. If you want to hear that, that's last time. 6 canonical hadiths, these 2 are the top ones. This is where, when Muhammad died, this was the extent of how much of Saudi Arabia was under Islamic control. And this is the progression of Muhammad. Endurance of persecution, like, you should patiently. Then he changes, and now it's okay to retaliate. Then it was a war against Mecca. Then it was, I guarantee martyrdom, and you go to heaven if you die for Allah, so go fight the unbelievers. And then it was global conquest and oppression. And that's where Islam really ends, is on this note. The latest entries into the Quran, Muhammad goes up from Mecca to Medina, and it's here that he becomes much more militant. He has the 3 major battles, the Battle of Bakr, the Battle of Uhud, and then this is the Battle of the Trench. Sorry, I'm going through this fast. But during this, in the aftermath of the last one, this is when he starts persecuting and killing Jews and others in mass numbers. And so he says, you who believe, do not take the Jews and Christians as allies. They're allies only to each other. Anyone who takes them as an ally becomes one of them. God does not guide such wrongdoers. So the militant Islamists would look at this and say, absolutely, you can't be friends with kafir. Like, they're gross there. You can't. People who are kind of in trying to reform Islam will come and say, that was meant for the time in battle. That doesn't stand. A pregnant, anyway, I don't want to get into that. So we talked about this in the last one, Muhammad gets more and more and more militant. But one of the issues with Islam, particularly Sunni Islam, which produces the most terrorism and stuff like that, is there's a doctrine called abrogation. And remember, Allah comes and says, if we ever abrogate, which means to repeal or replace a verse, and cause it to be forgotten, we'll replace it with a better or similar one. So in other words, because initially the Quran is all oral recitation, but if somebody forgets one and they're like, oh, I forgot it, Muhammad's like, don't worry about it. Like, Allah, he's going to give us a better one, which means the original one was not perfect, right? Because if he's going to give you a better one, that means the first one wasn't the best, which that's problematic on its own, because Islam teaches that the Quran is perfect. So how can you improve upon perfection? But anyway, this doctrine means that whatever comes latest is the most authoritative. Does that make sense? Like, if if Gabriel is only improving upon the Quran, then whatever he says last is the most authoritative for Islam. You follow? That's the doctrine of abrogation. So one of the Quran surahs, that's surah is a chapter, that comes last is 9. And when you open up 9, it's like, holy moly. Wherever you encounter the idolaters, kill them. So it's not like a particular battle. Wherever you encounter them, kill them, seize them, besiege them, wait for them at every lookout post. But if they turn to God, maintain the prayer, and pay the prescribed alms, in other words, they pay a submission tax, then let them go on their way. Another of this surah, fight those people of the book who do not truly believe in God and the last day, and who do not forbid what God and his messenger have forbidden, who do not obey the rule of justice until they pay the tax and agree to submit. So Islam comes up with this prescription that there's 3 options. When you come to an unbeliever, you invite them to accept Islam. Would you like to submit to Allah? If they say no, then you say, well, I have authority here. You will pay a tax to Islam. That's the jizya tax. And if they refuse that, their last option is death. You fight them and kill them. So that's the latest teaching that this is, again, the hadith, authoritative. That's the commands to Muslim. Bukhari 69:22, whoever changed his Islamic religion, then kill him. That's straight out of the mouth of Muhammad. So what do you do with this? Because it's fine and dandy that lots and lots of them are genuinely peaceful, and they would look at this and go, we don't buy it. But yet this is what they are commanded to do. He says, I've been ordered to fight against the people until they testify that none has a right to be worshipped but Allah, and Muhammad is Allah's messenger, and offer the prayers perfectly and give obligatory charity. So if they perform that, then save their lives and property from me, accept Islamic laws, and then their reckoning and accounts will be done by Allah. So let me just say this. If I genuinely believed that Allah was God and that the Quran was his word, I would kill everyone in here. Would you not? God has a right to everything in this world, and if this is his perfect word, who are we to say, no, I think my morality is better than you? And so this has real world consequences if people believe this. And so Muhammad engaged in 27 military expeditions and dispatched another 59 for a total of 86 battles in his life. He went up against the Byzantine army. And so this is where we closed. Within a century of Muhammad's life, Muslims had invaded, and just get the list. This is within 100 years. Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, Israel, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, former Christian countries, by the way, Libya, Tunisia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Algeria, Morocco, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Spain, and Portugal, forcing conversion, taxing, or death, to where when you get to the caliphates, that's how large Islam is. It is massive. And so when you get past that era, 1058, so we're 400 years away from Muhammad, you get an Islamic jurist who's al-Mawardi, who codifies the 10 functions of an imam. It's very famous in Islam. So it's the ordinances of government. And this is what he says. The imam is responsible for the organization and prosecution of religious war against those who oppose Islam or refuse to enter protection of the Islamic State as non-Muslim subjects. The imam is bound by the covenant of God to establish the supremacy of Islam over all other religions and faiths. So centuries are going, they're still holding this doctrine. Of course Islam has to conquer the world. During the same century, Europe's at war with Islam on 3 fronts. In the south, you have the Normans fighting to drive the Muslims out of mainland Italy and Sicily. In the west, you've got the Spanish Christians fighting to reclaim their homeland. In the east, you have the Muslims that are defeating Byzantine armies, and they're creeping up on Constantinople, the center of Christianity for the region. And so right before the Crusades, this is the reality. Muslims coming up this way, Muslims coming in this way, Muslims coming in this way. And so what happens is they get, and by the way, they have a history of attacking Constantinople. And so they come to fight it. Constantinople, the Muslims come to conquer it. Reinforcements come, they drive the Muslims and defeat them. And Spain, you have them coming up to Poitiers, I can't remember how to pronounce it. But the Battle of Tours, where Charles Martel drives them out of Europe because they made it this far. And Europe almost fell. And so they have to get to this bridge to make it past into Europe. Martel mounts up on this hill and defeats the Muslims here. You have the Muslims coming up into Italy and Sicily. This is all the different dates of different battles where they keep trying to come in. And so if you're Europe, you're like, holy cow, they are not letting go of this conquest. They're conquering us on all these fronts. Our armies are constantly being thwarted, and despite the setbacks in France and Constantinople, Islam's relentless pursuit of global conquest doesn't stop. In the next 3 centuries, Muslims' armies expand their reach into Sudan, Chad, Niger, Mali, Mauritania, Sicily, southern Italy, Bulgaria, Macedonia, Cyprus, northern India, Turkey, Greece, and Albania. You just feel it. It's unrelenting. It does not stop. And so then you get to the really shameful era for Christians. How dare you fight back? Right? So here you have, in the 11th century, Muslims' armies make it 50 miles from Constantinople, the Byzantine capital that had stood since Constantine. And the Muslims mockingly rename all this territory that they're conquering in Turkey, Rum, which is the Arabic word for Rome. What's the message? Rome is falling. We're coming. Right? And so at that point, the Byzantine emperor, Alexios I, sends a letter to the Roman Catholic Pope Urban II saying, you got to help. We're about to fall. We cannot hold. And so Pope Urban sends out messages. He says, "From the confines of Jerusalem and the city of Constantinople, a horrible tale has gone forth and very frequently is brought to our ears, namely that a race from the kingdom of the Persians," because they're over there now, the caliphate, "an accursed race, a race utterly alienated from God, has invaded the lands of those Christians and has depopulated them by the sword, pillage, and fire. It has led away part of the captives into its own country, and part of it is destroyed by cruel tortures. It has either entirely destroyed the churches of God, appropriated them for rites of its own religion. What shall I say of the abominable rape of women? To speak of it is worse than to be silent." And so, an increasingly desperate Urban even promises people, you'll go to heaven. If you die for the faith in the Crusades, like, you'll go to heaven, you'll forgive sins, which is something that Muhammad did. So the Pope is like, sounds good, let's try it. You can go to heaven by giving your life in battle, which not biblical at all, by the way. And so you have 9 crusades, Muslims win. Between 1095 and 1272, there are 9 crusades. The armies of Europe initially drive the Muslims out of Nicaea. Remember the Nicene Creed, Council of Nicaea. Antioch, Jerusalem, Judea. All these victories don't stand. Jerusalem repeatedly switches hands. So it goes to the Christians in 1099, back to the Muslims in 1187, back to the Christians in 1229, and finally back to the Muslims in 1244. By 1291, Muslims had reclaimed every single stronghold from the beginning of the Crusades. And then they added additional territory in Anatolia, Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, Albania, Romania, and Hungary. Islam also spread to Malaysia and Indonesia via trade routes, peacefully, those two, by the way. And so what stopped the Islamic advance? We briefly mentioned this. In 1258, the Mongolian Empire sacked Baghdad. The Abbasidian Caliphate, it ended the Islamic Golden Age. They slaughtered more than 100,000 people, burned the great library of Baghdad, which is tragic. The Mongols rolled up the Caliph, the head of Islam, in a carpet and trampled him with horses, and this marked the first time since Muhammad that there was no caliphate attempting to conquer the world. Like, they were done for a minute. And so, what's a caliph? Because it's kind of important. Any questions? You with me? All right. What's a caliph? Caliphs are appointed to be the religious and political successors to Muhammad. In Islamic history, there are 4 major caliphates. The caliphates govern from different cities with different power structures and governing philosophies, favoring different people groups and interpretations of Islamic law. But each of them claimed continuity with the long chain of succession all the way going back to Muhammad. So here's the 4. The first one is the Rashidun Caliphate. This is right after Muhammad, first caliphate. It has 4 caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. They're all stationed in Medina. The caliphate saw 3 out of 4 of them are assassinated. Only one of them dies of natural causes. And then after that, that's the size. When the 4th caliph is done, that's how much land they'd conquered. Then you get to the Umayyad Caliphate. Now, this goes to about 100 years after Muhammad. It's centered in Damascus, so it goes up to Syria. Rises in power after Ali's assassination. The first one actually is like, you know what? We really loved Umar's leadership as the caliph. We want to go back to that. He was really good at expanding territories and managing a huge empire. We love that. We're going to style our caliphate after him. And so they grow massive. At its peak, the Umayyad Empire was one of the largest empires in the history of mankind, encompassing 4.2 million square miles, more than twice the size of the Roman Empire at its peak, with just as many subjects. Internal civil war in Islam, known as the Abbasid Revolution, brought an end to this caliphate. So how big was that? Boom. So where the Roman Empire is like hugging the Mediterranean, they're massive, and they're going way to the east, all around the Mediterranean, except for Europe. They take Spain. They're pressing into Turkey. But they're massive, massive out of Damascus. The next one is Abbasid. This is going to be the golden age of Islam. So they last 5 centuries. Administrative centers Baghdad. They inherited all this brilliant stuff that was already present in Baghdad from ancient Babylon on. And so they led the Islamic Golden Age. Science, philosophy, literature, trade flourished. The resurgence of Aristotle and some of the classics. This was the caliphate that led Islam in the Crusades. It collapsed. They're conquered by the Mongols, but this is their caliphate. So then you have the Ottoman. After the Abbasid Caliphate, you have this gap, and then Ottomans pick up later after 259 years without a caliphate. The Ottomans, emerge in Turkey. Began the same year as the Reformation, interestingly. The leaders took control of Turkey. They conquered parts of Southeast Europe. They stopped the Mongol invasions, defeated the Mamluk sultans. They took control of Egypt, the Levant, and Western Arabia. And so, interestingly, the Ottomans expand Muslim control into Kosovo. So remember all the nations. Kosovo, Serbia, Bosnia, Romania, Moldova, Montenegro. So they're moving into Europe. Ottomans maintained the Islamic doctrine of global conquest. They all do. According to the teachings of Muhammad, the Ottoman Empire collapsed in 1924, marking the second time ever since Muhammad without a caliphate in place. So what does the church have to say about them? John Calvin wrote that the sect of Muhammad was like a raging overflow in which its violence tore away about half of the church. Islam just went through and wiped out Christians, wiped out church, forced conversions, and in places where the early church was the hottest, Northern Africa, gone. I mean, wiped out. A small remnant remained. And so you can see the Ottoman Empire in 1683 AD. So that's an important year. But you can see how much they're pressing in. They're no longer, Turkey's gone. Greece, gone. They're pressing up. Here's Vienna, Austria, right here, right on the verge. They're about to conquer it. And this becomes a decisive battle that turns Islam again from totally taking over Europe. In 1683, Muslim armies of the Ottoman Empire once again mobilized to conquer the center of the Holy Roman Empire in Vienna. Vienna served as the administrative seat of the Holy Roman Empire from 1558 to 1806. Muslims lay siege to Vienna for 2 months. They surround the city. They have it totally surrounded. Their numbers, 129,000, going up against less than 10,000 in this besieged city. And Vienna was about to fall. If Vienna falls, it's over for Europe. It's the last stronghold. And then a group from Poland, the Germanic states, and the Holy Roman Empire came and surprised the flanks of the Muslims and destroyed them and kicked them out, and Vienna was saved. If that had not happened, the list of nations I'd have to read would be much longer. But what I want you to hear is we started in 632. How many centuries now without a break, without relenting? Right? It's coming. It's coming. It's like a raging overflow. It will not stop. John Wesley says, ever since the religion of Islam appeared in the world, the espousers of it have been as wolves and tigers to all other nations, rending and tearing all that fell into their merciless paws and grinding them with their iron teeth. Many countries were once a garden of God, now are a desolate wilderness. So many once numerous and powerful nations are vanished from the earth. Such was and is to this day the rage, the fury, the revenge of these destroyers of humankind. Whew. You know what our first war was in America? Who can tell me? Besides the Revolutionary War. The Barbary Wars. Interesting. You know who they were fought against? Islam. So you have John Adams in 1786. We're brand new. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson have to meet with Tripoli's advisor to negotiate the terms of a truce so that Muslim nations would stop seizing American ships and enslaving crews. The Muslim ambassador from Libya is taking massive bribes in exchange for peace. In other words, you know what America was doing at our founding? We were paying the jizya tax. Muslim governments in Tunis, Algiers, and Morocco were also extorting money from America for the privilege of peace. In 1800, bribe payments to Muslim countries was the single largest expense of the United States government, apart from debt payments for the Revolutionary War. You ever hear that? Number one expense at our founding was paying Muslims for peace. That's wild. I'd never heard that. Annual bribes were 16% of the entire budget, more than the entire budgets for national defense and all the salaries of the government, the federal government combined. And so they go to this ambassador and they're like, but America's done you no harm. Like, why do you keep targeting us and enslaving our people? John Adams explained, the ambassador answered us that it was founded on the laws of their prophet and that it was written in their Quran that all nations who should not have acknowledged their authority were sinners, that it was their right and their duty to make war upon them wherever they could be found and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners, and that every Muslim who should be slain in battle was sure to go to paradise. That's straight out of what we've been learning. And it's 1,200 years this is still the MO. John Quincy Adams is almost 30 years after that. The son of John Adams is like, holy cow, like he's seeing war break out in Russia from the Muslims, wars breaking out in Greece, several conflicts in the Balkans, North Africa's got wars going on. And so Adams is like, holy smokes, this guy. And he writes about Muhammad. He says he poisoned the sources of human felicity at their fountain. He declared an undistinguishing and exterminating war as part of his religion against all the rest of mankind. The essence of his doctrine was violence and lust, to exalt the brutal over the spiritual part of human nature. The precept of, over fight, whereas the Muslims were trained to fight, and Christianity was saved in Europe solely because the people of Europe fought. If the peoples of Europe in the 7th and 8th centuries, and on up into including the 17th century, had not possessed a military equality with the Mohammedans who invaded Europe, Europe would be at this moment Mohammedan, and the Christian religion would be exterminated. Now, he's not a believer, so I believe in a remnant, but still. And so here you have in this century, where are we at? We got time. You have Sayyid Qutb, who's the most influential Islamic scholar of the 20th century. If you look up his writings, he wrote a book called Milestones in 1964, and he's railing at all these secular governments, because after World War I, when the Ottoman Empire broke up, they founded all these Islamic countries that were independent, and all the Islamic countries like Turkey and Iraq and all these others brought more secular governments. And so in 1964, he's like, how dare we allow the West and these secular governments to take root in Muslim nations? It is naive to think that Islam is just a defensive belief that only fights back when attacked. The truth is that Islam is a declaration of the freedom of man from servitude to others. It must remove all obstacles, physical, political, or social, that prevent people from hearing and accepting the truth of Islam. Jihad is for the purpose of annihilating all those human-made systems and establishing the sovereignty of God on earth. And so what happened in the aftermath of his teaching in 1964, you have all of these Muslim groups all over the place that say, yes, we need to eradicate secular governments in our home and institute Sharia law here, and we need to export that there, because the West is the enemy. And so you find things like this. This is Muslim Brotherhood. It's one of the largest Muslim organizations that is not declared a terrorist organization anymore, but should be, frankly. And so they write this whole manual about how to overthrow the West in 1991. And in it, this is their document, they refer to it as the civilization jihadist process. And it's like, I wonder what their strategy is. They say the Ikhwan, brother, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and at the hands of believers, so that it is eliminated and God's religion is made victorious over all other religions. In 2006, they don't hide this. Islamic dictator Muammar Gaddafi said this on TV: we have 50 million Muslims in Europe. There's signs Allah will grant Islam victory in Europe without swords, without guns, without conquest, but by increasing births and converting Europeans to the cause of Islam. Europe is becoming a Muslim continent. And after 1,400 years, right now, the trajectory is exactly that, which is tragic to me. In 1999, Islamic cleric Yusuf al-Qaradawi, chairman of the International Union of Islamic Scholars, promised Islam will return to Europe as a conqueror and victor, and after being expelled from it twice, it is destined to triumph in Europe. Since 1986, American colleges have received billions from Muslim countries. Look at these numbers. $1.2 billion to Cornell, Texas A&M, millions and millions and millions. And what are they doing? We need Americans to have a positive perception of Islam so that they're open to it, so that they embrace it, right? And a lot of these are wanting reform, by the way. Some of them not. But when you see the people who are jumping up and down, Queers for Palestine, this is where they're coming from. And it's the college campuses. In 2015, Sheikh Muhammad Ayed, Imam of Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque, this is one of the biggest, most important mosques in Islam, says this: Europe has become old and decrepit and needs human reinforcement. In other words, they're not having kids. They're all depopulating. They have no workers. We produce lots of kids. We migrate there, right? They need workers. They are not motivated by compassion for the Levant's refugees, but by a desire to replace their lost manpower. We shall breed children with them because we shall conquer their countries, whether you like it or not, by the will of Allah. In 2017, President Erdogan of Turkey urged Muslims of his country have not just 3 but 5 children. You are the future of Europe. Ahmed Janati, senior Iranian cleric and leading cabinet official, says, with Allah's help, Islam will conquer Europe and the flag of Islam will fly over the Vatican. He praised the growth of Islam in America, promising just like the movement destroyed the monarchical regime here, the Shahs of Iran got overthrown, it will definitely destroy the arrogant rule of the hegemony of America, Israel, and their allies. We saw a recent attempt to reform a caliphate by Abu Bakr. Hear that name? That's the first caliph, al-Baghdadi, in 2014. He takes 30,000 soldiers, conquers 40,000 miles in Iraq and Syria, and just starts murdering Christians and raping. Look at the population densities. Look at the 96%. Why? Either they're forced to leave or they're killed. In the West Bank, the proportion is down to 83%. In Syria, it's down to 87%. In Iraq, it's down to 84%. In Turkey, it's down 99%. It used to have a massive presence, gone. In Lebanon, which used to be majority Christian, down from 77.5% of the population now to 30.4%. And why? Because all of these places are radicalizing. You look at, like in the headlines just recently with Bill Maher talking about this. In Nigeria, there have been, since 2009, more than 100,000 Christians have been murdered. 18,000 churches destroyed. Why? Boko Haram, a Muslim terrorist organization, controls the north. Nobody knows about this, right? Why? Nobody cares. Like, we don't want to speak up about this. But meanwhile, in 1960, there were 200 mosques in all of Western and Northern Europe. Today, that number is estimated between 7,000 and 10,000 mosques, not including the thousands of mosques that are in Russia and the Balkan states. And the U.S., according to the U.S. Mosque Survey, the number of mosques in the U.S. has grown from 150 in 1970 to 2,769 in 2020. Nations like Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Afghanistan, Yemen, Libya, Pakistan, Sudan, Maldives, Mauritania, and northern Nigeria, you can't be a Christian there without facing serious risk to your life. And so what happened in 1924 at the end of the Ottoman Empire, the bizarre thing is, even though they're wiping out the Armenians, when they were broken up in all the nations of Islam, like Iraq and all these others in Lebanon, they're secularized. The backlash against those governments, where you see all of these nations now being overthrown, Ayatollah Khomeini with the Iranian Revolution, 1981, they're killing the Egyptian president, and then Muslim Brotherhood comes to power for a little while. The Taliban takes Afghanistan. Palestinians are electing Hamas. Boko Haram is slowly creeping and taking more of Nigeria. The Egyptians, Turkey, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Nigeria, like all these places are dumping moderate governments and taking on governments that do what? You're not going to be a Christian here. Meanwhile, all of the refugees are going where? All of the migrants are going where? And I don't love that their leaders are saying what's going to happen when they go there. We're just going to breed into power. And you look around in Europe right now, they're not wrong. You look here, like, this is sobering. It's sobering for civilization. Like, you look at, I talk about how worldview is so essential, and the woke stuff really bothers me. Marxism really bothers me. All that stuff is bad and terrifying, but it's weak. It really is weak. I think it's bad, but it's weak. This is unrelenting. It hasn't relented in 1,400 years, guys. I think it's demonic. And we have to armor up as a church. Because what's the answer? The answer is hopefully not bloodshed. The answer is hopefully not having to pay a tax. The answer is hopefully not my head on a pike because I teach this stuff. What is the answer? Jesus tells us. How do you fight, Christian? How do you fight? You put on the armor of God. You put on the helmet of salvation and the breastplate of righteousness and the belt of truth and the sword of the Spirit and the good news sandals. And you go out and you start tearing down strongholds. This is not, if you hear me saying, now go fight Muslims, wrong. That is a demonic answer. You know what the answer is? Go show them a God who loves them. That's our sword. And when we see a world that is falling, just crumbling under the weight of this demonic wave, where are the bold Christians to stand and say, no, I've got a worldview and a view of truth that is so much more glorious, so much more dignifying to humanity. Let me rescue you from this demonic slavery, and we've got to get bold with the gospel. That is the answer. And so this is not to make everybody in here go, oh crap, we're almost Muslim. This is like, church, wake up. The battle lines are drawn. This is urgent. Your liberties to do this stuff, if we wait too much longer for your kids and coming generations, I don't know they'll be there. Preach the gospel with some fervor while we can. Amen? All right. I hate leaving it there. But that's where we are. Really good stuff next time. Let me pray because we're over time already, and then Father God, Lord, I thank you. You know, we hear all this stuff, and Lord, I go back into your word, and I remember times when Jerusalem fell, and your people were sent into exile, and all seemed hopeless. But they were sent into exile all over the world, where they took your scriptures and they built synagogues, and in the persecution, they started spreading messages of your prophecies. So when Jesus came, man, it lit a spark, and your word had saturated the world, and what seemed like a great defeat you used to advance your gospel in a way that nobody could have envisioned. And we know that you're a God who's sovereign. We know you're a God who works like that. And right now, Lord, when we look around, we see a world that feels like it's collapsing into darkness and things are falling. And God, I give you so much thanks that it also seems like your church is waking up. Lord, I pray that you would give us favor. I pray that you would go before us as we hold high your gospel and as we exalt you to the nations, Lord. I pray that you would prepare hearts to see it, that you would free them from this demonic slavery of false belief. And Lord, that you would bring them to yourselves. We pray for mercy and conversions in the Islamic world. And by the way, the people who suffer most under this Islamic oppression is their fellow Muslims, by a lot. They are far more likely to be killed than unbelievers. And so we pray for them. We pray for your persecuted church in all these nations, Lord. Give them strength to endure. Give them favor in their evangelism. Give us courage that we would fight, and give us a heart that wants to see these people in heaven, because you died for your enemies, like me. Lord, give me a heart that is eager to die so that others can live. Take away my selfish desires and my comfort. Give me a boldness to preach your word, to lift you up, and to rescue people from this demonic stranglehold. We pray all this in Christ's name. Amen. All right. God bless everyone.